Hi guys, Byron here. Just want to talk to you guys and gals on some tips that you can use during your quarantine or after your quarantine. We're going to have to get used to being alone by yourself a lot more for the future reference. So what are you going to do with that time? This is a valuable time that you can use to utilize your thought process to become more productive on a day-to-day basis. I do have some tips. One of the tips is um, right here. It's called Success Magazine. This is the magazine that I started reading, I guess, probably 35 years ago. This Success Magazine was actually first created by a lawyer, believe it or not. I think around 1899, so it's been around for hundreds of years. I mean, it's unbelievable, and it contains a massive amount of information about success, about motivation, about drive, about passion, about organization, about planning, about creating a daily calendar. And to follow certain techniques, strategies, so on and so forth that can help your business. You can also go to success.com and it has some amazing stories, amazing tips and strategies on how to build a successful career. So obviously, I've been doing it for 35 years, done pretty good for myself, if I don't mind saying, and a lot of it's due to me following these success principles. And I've outlined these success principles in my own book called Always Forward, Never Back, which is based on 16 success-driven modules, which I'm hoping, like I'm praying, is going to come out around June. It's been completed and it's gone through the first edit, and I've had 3 close friends of mine read the book, and they were pretty impressed with it. So I think I've already done the job, but it does provide a lot of information for people that are trying to advance their careers from one level to another, and it's based on observations that I've made in both business and personally over the last 35 years. So part of it is autobiographical, but it's also based on probably reading like 70 books, 80 books, specifically on this subject matter, and watching maybe 500 hours of YouTube videos on self-help. And my goal is to help as many people as I can in the next 5 to 10 years. And I'm not looking for any money. I just want to try to help people. So I did want to talk to you guys a little bit about a recent book that I read. It's called The Latte Factor, and it's by author by the name of David Bach. That's B-A-C-H, and he is a prolific writer. He's written multiple books on business and what you need to do. From a financial point of view, I would consider him an expert in that area. His books have sold millions of copies, and he writes in a very simplistic way that anybody can understand what he's saying. In The Latte Factor, he has outlined basically 16 concepts that basically, if you listen to them, or you could do it in audio, or if you read these 16 concepts, they are fundamental principles that will help you in your business, especially if you're fairly young. So the first one, he says, always spend less than you make. Well, that sounds very, very obvious, but quite honestly, North Americans, Canadians, Americans, it doesn't matter what country you look, but North Americans are big spenders, and they overspend, and they spend more than they make. To give you an idea, 76% of North Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 80% have less than $3,000 in their bank account at any point in time for emergency use. So it's a serious, serious situation. You know, the government comes out and says they're going to spend or offer $83 billion to help people. They're not really helping people, man. Like based on what I've read so far, you know, they're asking landlords to defer 3 months for tenants. So in other words, the tenants don't have to pay the landlord for 3 months. But you know, I don't even think that's good for the tenants. I mean, all you're doing, so at the end of 3 months, guess what? You still got to pay, and you're going to have to pay a lump sum. So no, I don't see where that's good. The second principle that David Block sets out is pay yourself first, and I've always maintained that from every paycheck, if you pay yourself 10% of that paycheck and put it into an RRSP or TSA, TSFA, or whatever investment you want, that would be for your best interest. 3, he says don't budget. Now what he means by that, Mr. Block means by that, is that create an automated payment account so that you don't have to worry about budgeting, because everything is already internally budgeted, and it's automated so that the payments are made, so that you're not spending money and then have to double up on certain payments on certain individual accounts. That's probably a good idea. Be an investor, not a borrower. Obviously, that makes sense to me too. Like, don't borrow money to invest. You know, make the money, set it aside, and invest it prudently. Number 5, buy a home, don't rent. You know, in the United States, it's a little bit different because you can write off your interest on a mortgage. Here we can't, but on the upside of it is when you sell your principal residence, there's no tax. Not like the United States, so it makes more sense to rent in the United States. But in Canada, it makes more sense to not rent, but buy a home. And if you're paying $1,000 or $1,500 rent, with these interest rates today, you should be buying a home. So it only makes sense. And you know, over 25 years, over amortization of a mortgage, and you're paying a mortgage principal plus interest, but you're earning equity on every payment you make over those 25 years. So at the end of 25 years, you got a home that has value. That equity turns into tax-free money for you. So it does make sense in Canada. I'm not sure if it makes sense in the United States. Don't lend money to friends. You know, that sounds obvious, but guess what? You know what? If you lend money to friends, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to pay you back. So if you do lend money to friends, treat it as a gift, because it's probably not going to come back, and it's certainly not going to come back with interest. So that makes good sense to me. Invest for the long term. If you're a young person, 25 years old, or 30, or 35, or 40, you want to invest for the long term. Obviously, the older you become, it gets a little more tricky in terms of trying to invest for the long term. You know, I'm 60, I'll be 67 on April 10th. So I ain't going to invest for 25, 30 years. It's not going to work for me in that sense. But stay tuned, because I'll run some numbers by you, and you'll see the power of amortization and the power of compounding interest, and it will impress you. So his 9th principle is don't try to time the market. And I'm not sure if I necessarily completely agree with that. I mean, right now, if you got a lot of cash and you're waiting, you're patient, they're not using the word recession right now, but I can tell you there's 140 countries that aren't making any money right now, and it doesn't look like they're going to make any money for the next probably 3 to 6 months or longer. So whether they're prepared to admit they're in a recession, I would even argue we may be heading for a depression if we're not even in it now. So if you watch the markets now, you want to time the markets, within the next probably 2 to 3 months, the stock market is going to be way, way down. And if you got some cash and you got some time that you can wait for 4 or 5 years or 7 years or whatever, there's huge opportunities available for people to make real serious gains there. You know, you've heard the old expression, "The rich get richer." This is why the rich get richer. During these opportunities, they make a lot of money. Okay, so I think I'm on number 11. Never bet the farm. That makes sense to me. I mean, that's common sense. Number 12 is a very interesting one. Once rich, stay rich. Uh, in my opinion, it's harder to stay rich. I mean, I know it sounds foolish, but once you're rich, it's harder to stay rich than trying to get to be rich, because so many people, you know, they get to a rich point and then they lose it all, and you see it. You see it all the time. I mean, we have friends that, you know, they spend like they're multimillionaires, and there's a day of reckoning coming for those people. Um, so you gotta watch your dollars. Um, give back. Now that's a principle. That's a well-known principle. It's in the Bible. It's everybody's heard that. Give back. That doesn't mean you have to give money necessarily, like to your church or whatever. It means giving back in kind. So if you can help people through financial advice, through business advice, and you're not receiving any compensation for that, that's giving back. And that's as valuable as if you take $100 bill and give it to a friend. In fact, it's probably more valuable. Compound interest is a miracle, and that is so true. Give you an idea. If you save just $10 a day at 65 years old, if you start at 25, you will have 1.9 million. That's the power of compounding, right? So $10 a day, $365 a year, with the power of compounding. At 65, if you start at 25, at 65 years old, you'll have 1.9 million. Now, if you start at 35, you'll have 684,000. And if you start at 45, you're going to have 230,000, right? And 55, you'll have 62,000. So in a 10-year period, at $10 a day, you're going to have $62,000. I mean, that's, to me, that's dramatic. But it requires discipline, and it requires getting that money into your RSP and letting it compound. At 65, that's a lot of money. 1.9 million at 25 years old. Over those 20 years, 30 years at $10 a day is going to get you 1.9 million. So I mean, you do the math. Number 14, he says, never give up. No matter what. I've always said that, never give up. Always look forward, never back. That's the title of my book, and that's my principle. That's what I believe in. That's what I pass on to you guys. So, and then number 16, start early. The earlier you start on your investments, the more money you're going to have, the more equity you're going to have in your home, the more investments you're going to have, the more compounding availability you're going to have. So start early, finish rich. That's the position I've given to you today. It's, again, the book is David Bach, B-A-C-H. You can download it from Amazon on a Kindle. You can buy it from Amazon. It's well worth the read. If you read that book, you're going to read probably some of his other ones, which are very, very articulate and very well read. And he lays it out in very simple terms. So, you know, guys, that's my tip for today. Stay safe and stay strong. See ya. Cheers.